to obtain justice just as we are, right? And so, when we think about the US government, we should really understand that there are intentional efforts that are coordinated, if you will, where the US government has done everything in their power with intention and impact to sabotage different political organizations that are basically resisting what the US government stands for. So these political organizations, if they're resisting capitalist propaganda, if they're resisting, imperialist propaganda, if they're resisting any systems of oppression that encourage and promote classism, if they're resisting any systems of oppression that encourage or promote capitalist propaganda and classism, then those are the organizations that need to be in a space where the US government is trying its best to perpetuate and promote those while taking down and terminating the other ones that are resisting, right? And so, I think, of course, about our comrades with the Black Panthers. I think about our comrades with the American Indian movement. I think about our comrades who are set up doing encampments all around the world. Shout out to our Palestinian folks in occupied Palestine. May you get your land back. Like, we think about all of these different groups of folks that have been terrorized and victimized because they've been in organizations. Shout out to Gabriela, the Filipinx organization that's working to smash oppression. We think about all these organizations and how many of them have been under attack. The Pan-African Independent Party for Guinea-Bissau, the PAIGC, their headquarters were bombed, what was it, 2 months ago, Comrade Ajambo? I'm sure you'll correct me. So we think about all these different circumstances of how these folks are doing nothing but putting their lives on the line to impact the situations and to make things better for people. And if you do organizing work, if you're in an organization that's working for justice, at some point that your life could be on the line. You think about that, you're aware of it, but at the same time, you understand that there's something so much greater than yourself. There's something, the work that you're doing is impacting thousands and thousands, one can only hope, thousands and thousands of lives every day. And so you don't wake up with the intent of thinking about your well needs. You don't wake up with the intent thinking about how you should save yourself. If you have the humanitarian gene that you should have, if you're in an organization that is working for justice, then you understand that everything you do will impact the people who are suffering. So that means that all the work that you're intentionally doing is set aside so that other people can benefit from you, just like you benefited from other people before you, right? That's how that works, right? Had it not been for all of our ancestors, the ones who resisted getting on the slave ships, as well as the ones who unfortunately were kidnapped and captured, we wouldn't be sitting in the same space that we're in. I might be speaking a different language besides English had my ancestors been able to run a different direction, had they not been caught, had they been caught but been able to escape. Things may have been so much differently for me. I may be living in another part of the world, depending on how that background and that timeline may have went. And so just thinking about all of that, we have to understand that this system is not a humane system. It is not. And the propaganda out there will teach you that it is humane. I remember I was cooking dinner just a couple of nights ago, and I had some show on. I can't even remember what it was, but the commercial, I was streaming on Hulu, and the commercial that came on was for this new wine company, the Josh Wine Company. If you drink wine, you may know what I'm talking about. And the person who is making the wine is saying, this Mother's Day, we want to take the time and just really acknowledge the women in our life who have just gone above and beyond to help us be where we need to be. So we here at Josh, we encourage you to take some time out and call your mom this weekend for Mother's Day and just tell her how much she means to you. And I was thinking to myself, you are so sick, but you don't have a choice. You have got to survive in capitalism. So you're finding a way. I guess they put up a phone booth at their wine vineyard, which does not make any sense to me at all. But I guess they put up this phone booth. And so you see little videos of people walking in. Hi, mom. I just wanted to call and say hello. And I'm like, First of all, why do you need some European man at a vineyard to tell you to do that? A. B, how come you're not already doing that? Because if that's really a value that's important to you, then you shouldn't just be swayed so easily to jump on board and do it. And third of all, so after Mother's Day, are you going to continue to not value your mom who gave birth to you or the person who brought you in this world? Like, I'm not understanding how capitalism has convinced so many of you that this is the one day that you should just be going above and beyond, but tomorrow you'll be ignoring their calls again. Tomorrow you won't pick them up from work when they ask you to pick them up or whatever the situations are. And I don't understand that. And then to add insult to injury, the Saturday before Mother's Day is Pet Mother's Day. So now Petco and PetSmart and all these pet companies, Chewy, they're trying to get in on it. They're trying to get your money, y'all. It's money, money, money. That's all it is about. Just trying to make money on top of money on top of money. These people do not care about us. So I just think we should really unpack that. I truly, truly think we should unpack that because it's so sick. It is so sick to me. And this is such a vicious cycle within capitalism, but we can't forget about how imperialism also has a hand in that foot as well, also has a determining factor in that, because, thinking about imperialistic values and how they coincide with capitalism, it's about control, it's about power, and it's about making sure that you, the oppressed person, will never, ever have access to determine how your resources are being used. And as long as you stay not in control and not in power, your circumstances will never change. They'll never change. People will always be able to oppress you because they get to decide how the resources growing on your land, how they are spent, how they are sold, how they are bartered, how they are traded, whatever. And so just thinking more about that, we have to understand that this has always been the situation. Organizations that go against the grain. Comrade Ajamu said a saying a long time ago, and it has stuck with me literally into my adulthood. He said, it's so much easier to swim with the stream than against it. And I think that is so well put, because this is basically why the US government goes after organizations that are working to resist systems of oppression, because those organizations are swimming against the stream. They're not going in favor of capitalism. Next slide, please. They're actually going against. And so because of it, they must be punished. Thank you. And they must be in a space where they need to be terminated. This is also why we have so many people, our ancestors, unfortunately, who have fallen because they've been victim of murder, right? So we can think about all these different names of ancestors who have done some incredible work, and their mysterious murders can't be explained. We gave a beautiful seminar on Kwame Nkrumah and how we are really suspicious about the development of his cancer and how that happened right after he had a mysterious new chef, right? We, of course, talk about our comrade Malcolm all the time. Shout out to our comrade Assata Shakur. No, she has not been murdered. But just when we think about what it means to stand up for justice and how the US government considers that to be a threat, to the point where this comrade is not ever going to be able to come back to the US, because as soon as she comes back, she's under attack and her life will be hung on the line. We also think about our comrades who have been falsely accused and are now convicted for the rest of their life. So we think of Mutulu Shakur, we think of Mumia Abu Jamal, we think of all these different comrades who have done the necessary work, you all. They have understood the courage that it takes to show resistance and to be brave, but they also have understood the cost. They also have understood the cost, because that is the bottom line. This government does not want you to think that it offers a democracy where freedom is equipped with that, because that's not how they define democracy and freedom. Not in the way, at least, that we're talking about from a humane liberation standpoint. We're not talking about it in that way. Their democracy and their freedom means that you don't have a voice. And it means that you still have to be forced to do things that you may not want to do. I appreciate people in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, as well as my parents growing up. When they would go to work, they would use the term slave. Even in 2024, they would say, oh, no, I'm going to be at the slave today. And I always thought that was so intriguing as a little girl. And so even as an adult, I understand now that if you just decide some of us for 2 or 3 days, but for some of us, we can go roughly about 2 weeks without working before it'll start to have an impact on our paycheck. But for a lot of us, that's 2 or 3 days. For some of us, we can't even miss a day. We can't even miss an hour of work because our paychecks are so tight and we're depending on them. And so if you really think about it, sure, you want to make a livable wage so that you can afford the amenities of life. Maybe you live in a warmer climate and you'd like to have central air conditioning. Maybe you live in a climate where you'd like to have refrigerated food and electricity. You might like to have the internet in your house set up. So these are things, these are amenities that we don't need, but we appreciate if we have access to them. And obviously you need money to manage those things. But the point I'm making is it's quite interesting to me how if you decide to just stop using your labor as a way for somebody else to exploit off of it, and they can still exploit you but give you a paycheck. Let's be clear about that. So if you decide that you're in a space where you're not going to take that labor and give it to somebody else, and so therefore they're not going to pay you for that labor, what happens after that hour that you've taken off? How does that impact your paycheck? What happens after those 2 or 3 days? What happens after those 2 weeks? At some point, you're going to be impacted, and the amenities that you've come accustomed to, you're not going to be able to rely on them anymore. And that is why we call it a slave, ladies and gentlemen, and people. That is why we call it a slave, because you still have to go to work. At some point, you need to make profit and income. And if you do not make profit and income, your family will suffer, right? Maybe you don't have a big family. Maybe you're just responsible for yourself, but you still need to eat. You still need to wash your clothes. You still need to make sure that you have the internet in your house so you can pay your bills and maybe stream or play video games or whatever else you do. And if it's going to be another hot summer like it was last year, you're going to need some type of electricity so you can at least have a fan, if not central AC. And so these are some of the things that we're thinking about, right? Just in terms of what that looks like. I think about how students like myself are about to graduate, and we have so much student loan debt. It is ridiculous. And I'm so happy to tell people that the Department of Education, they really think that I'm going to pay them $985 a month. They really think that. And this is your world, you all. This is your America that you love so much, right? On July 4th, you're going to be going crazy for the same country that basically wants me to pay $1,000 a month. $1,000 a month. Not to mention, I'm going into a field where I will be working in a community space. So we're not talking about me going into a private sector. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about me working for humanity, but yet still having to pay $1,000 a month just because I needed to borrow some money to help pay for school, which in other countries, education is free. But that's not what we're talking about here. That's not what we're talking about. People who have wanted to make something of themselves, they still have to be punished and they still have to pay tuition that they can't even afford sometimes. And some students, if they don't even get financial aid, then they just drop out of school altogether because that's just where we are now because they can't afford the tuition. But this is the country you all love so much. When in actuality, you also talk about those same people, all the generations of today aren't doing anything. Well, how are we supposed to? We literally can't get an inch to get ahead. And when we do, there's other systems in place that make it extremely difficult for us. So I don't understand why you all support this system. I don't understand why you support America. This is not even your land if you're not indigenous. And I don't understand why you would go to bat for anything that supports inhumanity. I don't understand how you would support that. I don't understand how your conscience would allow you to stand up and to fight for something like that. So this is why we're talking about this topic, because I love how we have the picture of the two athletes there, and we're just thinking more in general about what the repercussions are if you stand up. But we're also trying to help you all understand why you have to understand that if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. Everybody has to make a choice at the end of the day. And we've already talked about how you should join an organization that's working for justice. But if you're not necessarily, ready to do that, then you can at least support a Pan-Africanist organization. If you don't want to do that, maybe you can support a Palestinian or an indigenous or an Asian descent or an Irish descent organization. But you should be doing something to help oppressed people, whether you're donating financial resources to them, maybe you're donating your time, maybe you're finding a way to offer your skill set to help with their website management. Maybe you have found other people that you can recruit to join that organization that is working for justice. But everybody has a responsibility. because we're all going to have to figure out how this world is going to be improved and made better. And if you're not in an organization that's working for justice, you can at least support one that is working to improve the conditions for people everywhere. And don't forget, there are international organizations. We're not just limiting your options to a US-based organization. You can join an organization anywhere, as long as it's working for justice and as long as you feel connected to it. And so as I prepare to close, I'm just reminding folks that because the US does not believe in this freedom and democracy that liberation and revolutionary people are defining it as, we have to understand that the US intelligence has worked really, really hard to make it really impossible for those same organizations that were resisting in the previous slide that we mentioned, making it really impossible for them to resurrect, making it impossible for them to continue the work, making it impossible for them to find new leadership, to take on, to onboard, things of that nature. And so this is how we understand that. And the US knows that if there's no one there to challenge them, the capitalist US system, I should say, they know that if there's no one there to challenge them, then they're fine. That's why they encourage you to be ignorant. That's why they encourage you not to read or do any education or political education building. They encourage you to just be in the norm and to not think critically for yourself. They encourage you to not try to be ethical about things, because it is sexy to be ignorant, it is sexy to be selfish, and it is sexy to be only with the midst of how you can just be about yourself and your family. It is not sexy for you to be collectivist. It's not sexy for you to be humanist. It's not sexy for you to be a socialist. That's a bad word. You're not supposed to say that. But people don't even know what socialism is. They can't define it. They don't even know. How could you be afraid of something and you don't even know what it is? But that's the problem when you don't know how to think critically, right? Because if you thought critically, then you would say to yourself, I really don't know what this means. I should think a little bit more about this. I should do some research before I describe that I'm afraid of this, right? And so it looks like I froze it up for a minute, but I'm just saying, if you're not able to think critically, then you're not going to understand that you really shouldn't be afraid of something you don't know, because that means you should be finding out more about it. You can't be afraid of it until you have the facts. And once you have the facts, then you can develop your emotional response to it. But that's the best thing you can do, is seek out education. That's the best thing you can do, is increase your political education. And you do that best when you're in an organization that is working for justice. And so, as I prepare to close, we should think more about how we can resist the typical heteronormative, cis patriarchal, how we can resist what that looks like under a capitalist US system, how we can fight to resist oppression, and how we have a responsibility to do something that is bigger than ourselves. We say that every weekend, but yet tomorrow when you go into work, you're going to put yourself first as usual. So make an effort this week and try to do one thing that is either humane or collectivist. Try to do one thing every day. And if you can't handle that, then maybe just one thing a week. But it starts with regaining your humanity. And no offense, but some of you have lost that. So it is time to get it back. It is time to ascertain what is truly important. We are all we have. And if we don't look out for one another, we're going to be really messed up. Even the ones that we don't agree with, we're still going to have to figure out a way to work with them. And they can either get on board with what we're doing, or we will find a way to deal with them. But we can't leave anyone behind, because the more hands we have on deck, the more stronger we'll be to take down the system and to make it happen in a way that we need it to happen. And so join an organization that's working for justice. And please don't forget, we have African Liberation Day events that are happening within the next 2 weeks. Please don't forget to donate via Venmo at A-APRP or PayPal at AAPRP. Again, our Venmo handle is at A-APRP, and our PayPal is at AAPRP. Ashe.
Ashe, obrigada, asante sana, medasi, thank you. And just to confirm, I've seen we have received budget requests from our various chapters and organizing areas. So far this year, confirmed, we're organizing African Liberation Day, at least a couple of events in Azania, South Africa. I believe Johannesburg is certainly one of them. And I believe there will be one additional program there. We also have a program in Nairobi, Kenya. We have a program in Zambia. We have a program in Ghana, in Accra, Ghana. We have programs we're supporting in Sierra Leone. We are organizing African Liberation Day program in Burkina Faso, supporting in Senegal. We're doing that all over the continent. In Germany, we have programs in Hamburg, London, England, it's happening. Paris, France, we have African Liberation Day. Toronto, Canada, it's going down. And here in the United Snakes of America, we're organizing a program in Baltimore. We have one in Orlando. We are doing one here in Oakland, California, and we will have more. But the point we're making is that we are advancing the theme of same struggle, smash settler colonialism in Palestine, the Americas, Africa, and Oceania, all over the world in several languages. We're doing that on May 25th. May 24th, we have our international webcast for African Liberation Day with this theme, and we'll show you the flyer as we close in a few minutes. But just to get into our topic that we have here, just a little history, if people don't know it or refreshing it. MOVE itself is an organization that was based in a couple of cities throughout the East Coast here in the United States, but primarily in Philadelphia. They had a large building that served as like a home base for MOVE there on Osage Avenue in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. MOVE is, their philosophy is one of a nature organization, a respect for nature. That's what they believe. And what I mean by that is that they are consistent with that belief. Whether you agree with it or not, they are consistent with it. So in other words, they believe that if there are rats on the property, the rats have as much right to be there as human beings. If there are roaches there, the roaches have as much right to be there as human beings. That's an extreme example, but I'm just making the point that when they say they are respect for nature, that's where they're coming from. And so because of their beliefs, there was constant conflict between them and the city of Philadelphia leading up through the 1970s. One of my first memories of struggle was when I was 15 in 1977. I saw the news report where the police had Delbert Africa. Many of the MOVE members adopted Africa as their last name. And Delbert Africa was one of those who spent a considerable time in prison. And I remember watching as a teenager where the police had him handcuffed with his hands behind his back in Philadelphia. I didn't know anything about MOVE. I didn't know anything about a struggle for liberation. All I cared about when I was 15 was Julius Erving, Dr. J, baseball, trying to think about women that I never would have had the courage at the time to talk to. That was it. But I saw that news report and I saw the police kicking Delbert in the head, even though he was handcuffed behind his back and unable to resist in any way whatsoever. And that image has stuck with me for the last almost 50 years. And it reinforced for me one thing I did know at the time, that this system is not for us. The police are not for us. And so MOVE had repeated clashes with city officials over primarily noise violations and different types of code violations that they use against us when they don't want us to function and operate. And this went back and forth. There were a number of efforts by MOVE members to negotiate with the city over these violations because they would have rallies there at the house on Osage and people in the neighborhood would complain. But what happened on May 13th, 1985 is the city mobilized an unprecedented dropping of C4 explosives on the MOVE building. And they did that with, at that time, I'll say, enough support of the surrounding primarily African neighborhood because people felt inconvenienced by the things that MOVE did, the rallies, et cetera, and so forth. And so regardless of that, nothing MOVE was doing substantiated dropping C4 on their building. I mean, that's just insane. And so as a result of that, there were around a dozen people in the building at the time the C4 dropped on the building. The building caught a massive fire. And as you can see from the picture, it didn't just burn the MOVE building, it burned multiple houses and buildings around the neighborhood. You know, so for the African people who thought the city was representing them, the city showed you they didn't give a damn about you because they just unleashed a aerial attack on an African neighborhood. And so in the MOVE house, everyone was killed, including children, except for there was one survivor, Ramona Africa, and she is still alive. And actually, I had the privilege several years ago of bodyguarding for her in a different state. So that has really is what, and then after they came in, they incarcerated a number of MOVE people. They called it the MOVE 9, and they were incarcerated for quite some time. And they have since been released after a long period of incarceration. But the primarily African neighborhood was manipulated into initially supporting the from MOVE and the entire neighborhood. Now, some allegations have come out about MOVE, some of their internal practices. People are not perfect, and there are contradictions. You don't have to turn your head far either way to see contradictions. But we're making the point that no matter what was going on internally to MOVE, there was no justification for the city of Philadelphia and their neo-colonial mayor, that Negro Wilson Goode, to drop bombs on the building and kill people. There's no justification. If you think that was justified because of some damn noise or some roaches, then you're just out. Somebody should drop a bomb on you. You're just out of your damn mind. You don't serve any constructive purpose on the planet Earth. To us, that was nothing except the raw terror this government has inflicted against the African masses for the last 5 centuries. And that was just manifested not even 40 years ago that this happened. So I think it's also very important to tie what happened to MOVE within a political context, because it wasn't just what happened to MOVE. Most of you know that that wasn't even the first time that a U.S. government entity has dropped bombs on an African neighborhood. That's happened multiple times, whether you're talking about the town of Rosewood, Florida, Tulsa, Oklahoma, whatever, Chicago, Illinois, the U.S. government and its various appendages has dropped bombs on African people multiple times. And why wouldn't they? They dropped bombs on the Vietnamese. They bombed Vietnam into submission in the 1960s and 70s. They bombed Libya into submission. They destroyed the Libyan Jamahiriya, bombing them. That's all they know how to do is bomb the hell out of people. They're bombing Palestine right now. They're killing everybody in Gaza, as many people as they can. That's what they do. That's what these people are. They're terrorists. They're a bunch of filthy terrorists, whether they call themselves Zionists, whether they call themselves capitalists, whether they call themselves just that white man and woman over there. They're a bunch of goddamn terrorists. They always have been, and they always will be. So this is what they do. And so it's important to understand that context, that they just didn't perform one single act and Wilson Goode got his sorry ass up there and apologized for it, and it was just some error, and we'll make sure that that's not what happened. This is a part of the policy against people who rise up in resistance against the capitalist system. This is what happens. And earlier today, I've had an action-filled last several days. On Thursday night, our comrade from Burkina Faso was here, and she asked if I could take her to the pro-Palestine encampment on the university campus here, and I did that. I've been doing security work with that encampment, and she was able to address about 100 of the young students there and talk to them about how we, the AAPRP, is doing work in Burkina Faso to educate our people about the connections between what's happening in Gaza and what they're doing in Africa against our people. And I've also done a number of trainings, security trainings. I did one there early this morning with them, because they have Zionists. I've been there twice. Friday night, I was there doing a training, and the Zionists came and pushed through the barricades and came in there and was like, whose land is this? And I was one of the first people to get to him, and I said, it's not your land, cracker. And I pushed his ass all the way out of there. And some people, you know, we have to do trainings. We have to do political education. Some people didn't understand it. Training, they understood it a lot better. I explained to them that you can't have terrorists coming in here putting their hands on people. This guy was pushing people around. You can't have terrorists. I did him a favor. I wanted to knock his ass out, but I was there as a guest, and so I didn't do that. We just pushed him out. But my point is that this is who you are dealing with, and this is what I told the team of people this morning out there. Is one of them said, well, I don't mind being arrested, but I don't want to be expelled from school. And I told him, like, look, the reality is, because I'm going to tell you the truth. They're used to me now. They know, like, you're going to tell us how it really is. I'm like, absolutely. If you decide to do this work, you got to understand that there's risks involved. There always have been for everyone who's done it, and there always will be for everyone who does it. And you can't control what the outcomes of those risks. All you can do is decide what's important to you. And whatever you answer, that's your decision. I'm not here to judge you one way or another, but you have to decide if you want to do this work that you are risking everything. You could be risking everything by doing this work, including your life. White supremacists coming in here. So you could be risking everything. So if you're not prepared to do that, you should go try to find something else to do, because that's what this requires. And so I'm saying that because these people in this government and all these capitalist imperialist governments around the world, they are not playing with us. We're playing around with them, but they are not playing with us. They are intent upon wiping us out. And so we have got to make that decision, because like the slide is saying, whether you talk about colonialism in Africa, the transatlantic slave trade, which is obviously connected to that, the Middle Passage, which is a part of that, the brutal repression of indigenous people, right? The thousands of lynchings that happened against African people, Jim Crow segregation, legalized racial segregation in this country. That's the history of this country. The violent suppression of peaceful civil rights workers. We're talking about all this bullshit BS they're talking about today about, well, it's how you protest. That's not it. We have had people, thousands of people wear all white and march peacefully. And they have slaughtered our people for doing that. The indigenous people marching peacefully, they have slaughtered them for. Do these people have no conscience? This is not about how we protest. It's the fact that we dare to stand up in any way whatsoever against them. That's the problem they have with it. You got to get that straight. That's the problem. They will never be satisfied, no matter what we do. The only thing they want us to do is assimilate and act like they're Europeans and do everything they want us to do in this capitalist system. Anything beyond that is going to be a threat to them. You can wear an afro, that's a threat to them. You can wear indigenous braids, that's a threat to them. You wear a keffiyeh, that's a threat to them. We have got to understand that we do not fit in this damn society, and we never will. Those of us who stand on principle. Now, the sellout Negroes fit just fine. They sit there and talk with great diction and learn how to conduct themselves, which side of the damn plate the fork and knife should be on. Those people will fit in because they're selling their souls to do that. But for those of you who make the decision that you're going to stand up and be a human being that stands on the side of justice, you are going to have problems. And if you're not having any problems, it's because you're not doing a damn thing. Period. That's all to it. So, like all of these things, the violent raids on 33 Black Panther offices, the violent repression on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota against the work of the American Indian movement, the violent suppression of Black Lives Matter movement, and the framing of people. You know, there are dozens of Black Lives Matter activists who have been killed since 2014. Y'all know that? These people are not playing games. The U.S. has been absolutely consistent in demonstrating its daily inhumanity and brutality. This is what I told them this morning. This team, this training is for people who want to defend justice. This is not the place. I told them this morning. This is not the place where we're going to have a discussion about nonviolence. If you want to do that, you're in the wrong place. We're talking about when people come in here and they're violent, how the hell we deal with them. That's what we're talking about. And if you don't want to talk about that, you got the wrong person in here talking to you, which is fine. I'll pack up and leave. I got other stuff to do. I spent yesterday in Oakland leafleting all day in the sun for African Liberation Day. I'm busy trying to do this work. So if somebody doesn't want to do the work the way we're doing it, I'm fine with that. I got all kind of other things I can do. But they were like, no, this is great. This is exactly what we need. And of course, it was the women and the marginalized people who are like, yeah, we have to defend ourselves. We are the only ones who have a defense for us. The police are not our friends. The women and the marginalized people were the ones saying it. The men were, some of them were mealy mouth, not many of them, mealy mouth, men, we're good at talking, but it's always been the women and the marginalized people who really put the rubber to the road as it comes to taking risks for justice and suffering the consequences. And I know that you men don't like hearing that. I don't give a goddamn what you like hearing. If you don't like it, step up your damn game and stop acting like a damn coward all the time. And then you won't have to hear that. But until that happens, that's what it is. That's been my experience. That's what I see. I tell people all the time, I'll take a team of women and marginalized people over men any day of the week, any day of the week. And that's just how it is until we see something different. And so we see that this counterinsurgency has always been a consistent aspect of our existence in this society. The picture on the top of the screen, if you can see it, is Marcus Mosiah Garvey being arrested in 1927. And then the picture on the bottom is a pro-Palestinian protest just a couple of weeks ago, or a week or so ago. It's never stopped, and it never will stop. You know why? Because capitalism is built on injustice. And the only way that the people who dominate this system can maintain it is by continuing to raise the temperature on the injustice. There's no compromising with them. There's no negotiating with them. There's no hoping that they understand. There's no hoping they wake up better people. If you believe any of that, you're just living in a fantasy world. The only thing that kind of reactionary, oppressive power respects is people who are willing to achieve seizing power from them by any means necessary. That's it. And what happened to MOVE, what happened to the Black Panther Party, what happened to the Republic of New Africa, what happened to the Convention People's Party, the African Party for the Independence of Guinea-Bissau, the Democratic Party of Guinea, the National Congolese Movement, the Pan-African Union of Sierra Leone, what's happened to all of our organizations? And not just us. What's happened to the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the Al-Fatah, the Palestinian Authority, Hamas, which happened to all the Palestinian organizations, is a reflection of the people and the systems that we're dealing with. There's no negotiation. You sit here with this punk stuff. Well, I'm not going to say that I support Hamas. I support anything that stands up for Palestinian self-determination. If the Palestinian people say that that's Hamas, they got every right to stand behind Hamas. What the hell are you doing to stop the terrorism that's engaged against them? If you are scared to identify with a terrorist, you should de-identify yourself with this backward empire. This is the #1 terrorist nation in the history of human civilization. You're not running to separate yourself from them. That's the problem. So we have got to understand that this is a part of a larger effort to snuff us out, because as long as we exist, we remain a threat to the forces of power in this society. So we would argue that our best response, you all, the best thing that we can do about this is that we have got to learn the history. There are so many of us walking around today that we think we know the history. We want to act like we know the history. We really haven't done the work. And the reason why it's clear we haven't done the work is because we're not doing the work other than running our mouths. 90% of what we produce is what comes out of our mouth. We're not doing any work. We're not making any sacrifices. We're not doing that. And I'm not bragging, because I don't do anything that any of my comrades in the All-African People's Revolutionary Party don't do. If you want to get hard work, I can say this with complete confidence. If you want to get some hardworking, uncompromising organizers to do some work, you need to connect with AAPRP comrades and cadre. That's who you connect with. That's who's going to do that. So I'm saying, because we live our life, I just told you how the last few days have been for me. I know most people are not going to be able to keep up with that kind of pace and still work a slave job and do things around the house. They're not going to be able to do that. They could do it, but it takes a lot of effort, and people don't want, everybody wants everything to be easy. They don't want to put any work into anything. But there's no way we can do what we need to do without the work, because the enemies that we have are constantly working to repress us. And we think that we could sit on our asses all day and get high and watch TV, and that's going to prepare us to deal with them. And how is that working out for us? It does not work out. We have got to decide whether we're going to fight or we're just going to, I started to say something, I'm not going to say it, whether we're just going to just give in and be the slaves that they want us to be. But the first step is we've got to learn this history. That's all we're saying right now. Nobody's asking anybody to take any physical risk against themselves. Although, as I said before, that's a part of the process. But we're not really, that's not something that most of us are going to be dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Most of what we're asking people to do is just decide that you're going to be a part of a process to understand this. This is what I was telling the students just the other night. I had a young person, a comrade that I consider family, beloved person to me because of their commitment and their sincerity to the struggle, and great support to the work that we do in the APRP. Great support. This person is not even African. They're indigenous person, younger person, but they do more work to make sure African people know about our work in the APRP than most of these Africans flapping their gums. I mean, that's just an objective fact. They do. So this person called me and they were saying, you know, they want to understand the Palestine situation, but they don't, you know, they're just not really someone that loves to read. And I was telling them, you got to figure that piece out, because there isn't any other. I mean, the propaganda that the Zionists use is so thick and convoluted, and it's so 2% truth, 98% lies, that if you don't have the intense critical analysis skills, there is no way you're going to be able to properly dissect that the way you need to. And the way you get those critical analysis skills is you have to constantly engage in this question of struggling over ideas. And the way you do that is you have to bury your head in literature about this history. You have to study these dates, these times, link things together as they happen, and you have to sit down with other people to get a proper understanding of that. You have to challenge your brain to learn how to respond to that process. That's how you develop your critical thinking skills. You cannot do that just by watching videos or talking to people or listening to what people tell you, because your brain is in a rest mode when you're doing that. When you're watching TV, your brain is in a rest mode. You think that you're thinking, but your brain, for the most part, is just in a receipt mode. It's not doing anything. It's not initiating anything. When you're listening to a lecture or you're watching a video, someone else is telling you what's happening. When you read, you have to decipher what's happening. You have to figure out what it means. You have to be able to interpret what it means in relationship to other things in history. And it sharpens your ability. The more you do it, it sharpens your ability to do that. And that's how you sharpen your mind. And once your mind becomes sharpened like that, then the things that I know I was talking about before I was able to get better at that had no relevance to me after that. I'm no longer concerned about it. I'm only concerned about the things that mean much more, have much more importance. So that's why we're saying that. We got to learn the history, and we can't just read it ourselves and then die and the history dies with us. We have to make some work. Maybe you're like, I can't stand the APRP. That's fine. We really don't care. But I want to read some history, get some study groups together, and get people to understand that, hey, I would be your biggest fan if you did that. And you could come and tell me, Ajamu, I can't stand you or your organization, but I'm going to start these study groups. And I would say, is there any way that I can help you so that I don't get in your way? Because I know you don't like me, but I totally support what you're doing. Because I'm not in this for that kind of ego. I don't need you to like me. I got plenty of people that like me. I got plenty of people. I've spent the last 5 days with dozens of people telling me, like, you're a wonderful human being. And I tell them, no, I'm just trying to live up to my responsibility. That's it. I'm not anything else but that. There are people who have done more in a year than I would do in all. So I'm not that. So I don't need your validation. I don't need that. I don't need that from anybody. All I need is for us to get stronger in our work. That's what we need, so that we can be decisive in how we build our individual and collective legacies. That's what this is about, you all. That's what all of this comes down to. What type of person do you want to be remembered? I remember the comrade sister in the Malcolm X grassroots movement in Oakland. I saw her, and, how you doing, African? And she's like, I'm doing good. And I'm like, I hope you're doing well. And she's like, all I'm trying to do is make sure somebody pours libation for me when I'm not here. And I remembered that, because I'm like, that is it right there. That's all there is. That's all there is. You can't take none of this material stuff with you. You can't take it with you. So all I'm trying to do is the same thing that comrade said. I'm trying to make sure that when I pass and I'm not here, people are saying, man, that dude, he tried to do everything he could to try to move us along. That's what I want people to say. They can't say, well, he abused people, he manipulated people, he stole from people, he manipulated women. And nobody can come and say that, because those things never happened. I want them to be able to say he did everything that he possibly could to move our struggle along. And he made great sacrifices in the course of doing that. That's what I want people to say. And if that is what people say, then I fulfilled my life mission, you all. And if I drop dead after this next word, I'll be satisfied with that. And it's because of that I don't sit around worried about death and all that. I don't give a look. I'm gonna work as hard as I can while I can. I let out somebody else has that job to determine how long I live. I don't know. I don't know what that is. I don't care. And that is the mentality that I really think we have to develop. What is your legacy? If you died today, what would people say about you? That's what you got to think about. They are not going to be talking about, I have this dude I know, this African, he's decided to spend all his life figuring out how to make money, and he's done that very well. He has a lot of money. And he's always talking about his money. And I told him last time I talked to him, because he told me, I know he doesn't have a good relationship with his children. And I told him, like, really, man, you're always bragging about your money, but if you drop dead from a heart attack right now, your kids are going to be fighting over your money. Then you, by your own words, they don't care about you. I would never want, there's no amount of money on earth that would make me want to be in that position in life. No amount of money could accomplish that. How do you want to be remembered? Because you can listen to this about MOVE and about PAIGC and about the Congo and Palestine. You can listen to this for the next 300 years. But the bottom line is, as it relates to those questions, what are people going to say about you in relationship to any of that? That's the question that each and every one of us, I don't care whether you live in Africa, the Western Hemisphere, Europe, the Caribbean, I don't care whether you are a man, a woman, a non-gender binary person. I don't care if you speak French, German, Spanish, Portuguese, Creole, English, Swahili. It doesn't matter whether you like fried chicken, or you prefer jollof rice, or you like tilapia fish fried with banku. All of that means nothing when you die. You won't be. Matters is how often are people going to remember your name? I saw a meme yesterday that made me think of this. Someone said, no one ever talked. Limbaugh was a filthy, reactionary, swamp smelling white supremacists who had a radio program for years and spewed out the most vile white supremacist, patriarchal, and homophobic rhetoric that you can imagine, and had a large following because there's plenty of swamp-dwelling people that agree with that, especially in this backward empire. So he died several years ago. And this person that wrote this meme, they wrote, "You never hear anybody talk about Rush Limbaugh anymore." And the reason why is because he didn't. And I thought about it, I'm like, that's absolutely true. And I thought, I don't want to, next Sunday will be the 99th born day of El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, Malcolm X. That man has been dead next year, right? For 60 years next year. 60. He's been dead. Most of you listening weren't even here when he was alive, weren't even close to being here when he was alive. But yet all of you know who he is. And I don't have a single day that passes when I don't think about him. I never met the man in my life. I met his wife and his daughter. I bodyguarded for his wife and his daughter on separate occasions. I met them, but I never met the man. I wasn't even 3 years old when the man was killed. So I didn't get a chance to know. He didn't hold me. He didn't talk to me. But his legacy, you all, cannot be disrespected. There are so many efforts by people that try, but I'm like, hell, I'm going to listen to them. I know who the man was and what contribution he made. I never met Kwame Nkrumah. I never met Sékou Touré. I never met Amilcar Cabral. I never met Carmen Piera. I never met Mbalia Kamara. I didn't meet Andre Blouin. I didn't meet Patrice Lumumba. I didn't meet any of these people. And still, I think about them every single day. Every day. What legacy will you leave? That's the question you got to answer. It's not about, well, why'd they do that to move? It's like, what does that mean for what you're going to do going forward? Help us organize African Liberation Day, please. Venmo at A-AAPRP and PayPal at AAPRP. And we want to invite you back next Sunday. We appreciate you coming. The upper left-hand corner QR code, scan that on your so-called smartphone. Some of us, the phone is smarter than we are. But scan that on your smartphone, and you will be able to get our other AAPRP programs, our Forward Ever shop, where you can buy revolutionary clothes with messaging, hoodcommunist.org, Revolutionary Pan-African blog. You want to support that, abetterworld.me for these videos. And there on the left, African Liberation Day, you have our flyer on May 24th. This is an international webcast, so you want to join in. There's nothing else out here like we have how you can support African Liberation Day, the links and everything laid out at the bottom, so you can copy those and make a donation, you all. We want to invite you to join us next week. We mentioned May 19th, the 99th born day of El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, Malcolm X. We're going to be talking about Malcolm X and the campaign to demilitant our youth. What does Malcolm's work mean in comparison to these efforts to soften our resistance today and get us focused on building wealth within the capitalist system? That's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be addressing that head on. And then for those of you here in the Bay Area, on the right, we have our program for African Liberation Day, because I mentioned we're doing the webcast on the 24th on Friday, and then on the 25th, the actual African Liberation Day, we'll be doing commemorating events. It's the Oakland event that we'll have here in Oakland at the East Side Arts Alliance Building, 2277 International in Oakland, California. And you can see all the information there from 3 to 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And so the bottom QR code we have for those of you that want to support our program in Burkina Faso. I mentioned we had our organizer here on Thursday night, went and talked to the encampment students, and she told me that they listen to this program in Burkina Faso. They see that you are supporting the program. They are very appreciative. They're inspired by your example. So please, at www.aaprp-intl.org. We appreciate you. We support you. Come back next week. Plan right now. Put African Liberation Day on your calendar. Forward ever, backwards never. Stay strong. Don't believe these lies. We are winning.